Today, we are here to chat about High School Musical 3. I have already covered the first two movies, and one thing I have been doing in my coverage specifically is looking at the story of the status quo that we do see in High School Musical and relating that to how patriarchy, how white supremacy is upheld in our society today, and looking at how these storylines show the ways that that works, and also not just emotionally and how we please other people, but also in Sharpay's storyline, when we continually only think of ourselves, what are the ways that we unfortunately make some bad decisions and hurt other people at the end of the day. And I think High School Musical is an interesting way to do this because I like talking about relating the stories of our movies to the real world. Because one thing about film and TV is that anytime you watch something, you are not just like watching a made up world, right? Like, if we were all given the same prompt, right, we would all write our individual, very different stories, right? And we may have different lessons we may write into our story that we want for the audience to take away, or maybe we just write a story that's interesting. And the thing is that you will see all of our internal biases come out and our interpretation of how different conflicts may come up and how those come about in a storyline. And these are all reflections of our outer world, right? As much as it can be fiction, we see reflections of that, right? Even in the most fantasy stories, we can make comparisons to the real world, right? And that is the interesting thing, is that we are not ever going to be void of that in our writing in any way, shape, or form. Now, something interesting as far as the difference between the first two High School Musicals and the third one, other than the obvious being that this is a wrap up of the three movies, in the first two movies, we really saw a full storyline play out to watch how people placed Troy to the status quo. What happened when someone like Sharpay wasn't getting her way? What are the obstacles she threw in together? How did we learn to work together? We're all in this together. And we really got two full rounded storylines. The first one, whilst we tackled many things, I always say the status quo of patriarchy, because we were learning, like, what are the ways that kept Troy back feeling like he couldn't participate in the musical, right? What are the ways the status quo affects us into how we think, and hey, that seemed as too girly, maybe I'm not going to do that, or everyone keeps telling me that it is, but I kind of just like singing, why can't I just do this? The language that we see from the people on the team, not just a disruption to what they feel is the loyalty to the Wildcats, but the loyalty to the status quo that Troy was not upkeeping. And he was in an interesting thing. He was in a position of power, right, in a way that other people weren't. So when Troy was breaking the status quo, that's why everybody was starting to admit things, right? In High School Musical 2, we see Troy stray from the person who he always was, right? Where he always struggled with the status quo, as we saw in the first movie, but we also saw a storyline with him taking advantage of all the things Sharpay was throwing his way. And was that really the right way to go about it? What did he have to lose to really understand who he was, who he wants to be, how he took accountability and bet on it, and how he made decisions moving forward to help uplift the people that he always supported? From Sharpay's standpoint in High School Musical 2, we were watching really the nastiest of her storyline, right? And the episode is called The Status Quo of White Supremacy in High School Musical 2, because we really get to see these inner workings of how do people like Sharpay move in the world when they don't get their way? What obstacles are they going to put in people's ways? What language are they going to be using? For example, when she calls the Wildcats just dishwashers and calls Ryan a traitor for working with them, right? There are more things we could unpack there, that we obviously don't actually get into in the hour and a half movies that we're watching, but we can really use that to evaluate how that we see that in, our real world, not the movie world. And High School Musical 3 is interesting to me because we're kind of tackling not just a wrap up here, but our emotions, right? The thing about the status quo is that it's the forever work, because we are simultaneously living in a society that is still trying to uphold it as much as we are trying to break free from it. And we're really seeing the emotions of grief and really confusion, right? In that, like, oh my God, what do I really want to do? Do I really want to give myself a chance and say this is an option or not? And the other grief we'll get into, but the grief of the status quo in that we're accepting change. And what does that mean? What do we have to rewrite in our brain as we're learning to deconstruct the status quo? How do we gain our independence and trust ourselves and trust our friends to know what's best for them? There are so many interesting things that we'll get into with High School Musical 3. And that is something interesting about High School Musical 3 that, although my critique about High School Musical 3, which is why I can't say it's my favorite, High School Musical 2 is my favorite, but I get everybody loves the look of High School Musical 3 was made for theaters. I completely understand. I want it all iconic musical number. But it cannot be my favorite because of the fact that it is like halfway through, it's like a normal High School Musical movie, and then it like kind of dips off. And that dips off is really just feels like a weird thing to say. That dips off? The reason that dips off is because of the fact that it is a wrap up movie, right? Like, we're just kind of like, we don't have a big storyline here, right? We see evidence of like Sharpay doing her usual act up, but we don't get a whole storyline revolved around it in the way we did in the other two movies. But it's really just challenging people's inner battles, and that's what I like about High School Musical 3. And the interesting thing about High School Musical 3 is that although we're not, elaborating on it in like a very intricate way, we can really use High School Musical 3 to evaluate, well, what does stop people from breaking free of the status quo, right? Why is it the forever work? What are the emotions people are feeling that ultimately hold them back from being honest with themselves about breaking free of the status quo? And that is so interesting about High School Musical 3. So instead of taking you through the entire movie start to end, because this is a different format, I would like to differently format the way I'm going about this. And that is going to be we are going to cover each of the characters that I feel like are relevant in this and the lesson that they learned throughout the storyline. So, the characters we are covering today: Gabriela Montez and her story relating to the grief of not wanting things to change. Of course, Sharpay Evans and the way she projects her way of thinking onto others. Ryan, we are going to be covering him. He's probably the smallest category in this, but just him establishing himself away from his sister and finding his independence in what he's doing. Chad, we are going to be talking about the grief of the status quo and what that means for our future, and also a little note about childlike wonder and how that is related to the status quo. Troy Bolton, the main character of our movie, we are going to be deciphering what he wants to do. Why was he so confused? And what is the real lesson of the status quo? So, first up, Gabriella. In High School Musical 3, she was accepted, early acceptance, into Stanford. Wonderful. We knew she was smart. We knew this was going to happen. What's the holdup? She doesn't want to tell Troy. Why? Because she knows Troy supports her and will tell her, like, obviously you have to go. But Gabriella, at this point, we didn't learn, but she's feeling a lot of grief. I think at this point in the movie, they might have already done Right Here, Right Now, which is really a song about, I wish we could freeze time because we're not going to be like this forever, right? I just want to appreciate the moment we're in now. And to me, this is an interesting note because it lays the groundwork for what happens in what she does when she walks away. And that is an interesting note because at some point in the movie, okay, Sharpay overhears Gabriella telling Taylor that she explicitly is not telling Troy. Okay, now what does Sharpay do? You know how Sharpay moves, right? She's gonna go to Troy and be like, I am so sorry to hear Gabriella is leaving early, right? Because she wants to, once again, place this kind of, she wants to kind of push them away from each other, which is really funny because I feel like I have more to elaborate on High School Musical 2, the shit that went down, and maybe I need to return to it someday. But, High School Musical 2, she was trying to drive them apart as well, right? But she wants to kind of put in that, like, ooh, there's something you guys are not telling each other, right? To kind of put the thing between them, right? She wants to kind of divide them a little bit because Troy and Gabriella, like, I think it's really funny because I've spoken about the ways in which Sharpay really views Troy as like a trophy moment. Like she doesn't like genuinely like Troy as a person. And she just wants to be, I don't know, like the popularity of it all and just to have her gotcha against Gabriella. Like it's very interesting, like her like obsession with like needing to be around Troy. But like she doesn't even actually really like him. Like why is she so invested? Beyond me. So what happens next is Gabriella and Troy are in her room and he's like, I heard about the Stanford thing. Why didn't you tell me? And they actually do have a nice conversation, and it's very sweet. And obviously, once again, Troy is supportive. He's like, obviously, go to Stanford because Gabriella was trying to say, maybe I'll do a semester at U of A and I can defer and then I can go, right? Because they don't want to be away from each other. But the thing about the status quo, right? And the thing about truly caring about someone is like you do what you need to do and the rest will figure out, even if it's going to be tough, right? Because they want to stay together and it's cute, it's cute, it's cute. But obviously, Gabriella, pursue the future you want. Don't stay back for a boy. And we will touch on that more later. But I want to get into Gabriella's grief storyline here. So, one thing you have to remember about Gabriella is she is used to moving school to school to school, right? East High is the first time she has placed down roots. And in the song Walk Away, which happens as she's leaving for Stanford, we get more clarity on what exactly she is thinking. So she says to Troy, I'm a lot better at goodbyes than you. I've had a ton of practice, right? This idea that if I don't let myself care, then it'll be easier to say goodbye because you and I both know, like, no matter what, it's just gonna be sad, point blank, period. There's nothing you can do to escape the grief, right? Because it's just like a fact. Like, you can pretend it doesn't bother you all you want, but we know that it's affecting Gabriella. So, these are some of the lyrics to Walk Away. Guess I should have known better to believe that my luck had changed. I let my heart in forever finally learned each other's names, right? Like I was saying, she placed roots here. I tell myself this time it's different. No goodbyes because I can't bear to say it. I'll never survive the one that's coming if I stay, right? So, not only is she sad because she's placed down roots here, which is amazing. That has been a wonderful experience for her, right? But she not only is leaving point blank done now, she is going to be leaving again, right? Because she made commitments at least to come back for prom. And at this point, she wasn't going to commit to the musical anymore. And she was at least going to come back for prom, right? And this idea that my heart is breaking, I'm leaving now, right? And then I'm going to come back for prom and then I have to say goodbye all over again, right? And is she going to come back for graduation and then have to leave again? Like, right? Like, it just keeps like the wound will never heal because I just have to stay away, right? And that's something that Gabriella does is at some point she calls Troy and she's like, I'm not gonna come back. I'm not gonna actually come back at all. Like I'm getting settled here, like right. But she's really trying to escape the grief that she knows she feels like once she goes back there, she's really gonna have to confront it. And that's very interesting. And I think this is a very interesting storyline that, like, I genuinely never thought about when I first watched High School Musical 3, obviously, because this movie came out in 2008. So, I was young, I wasn't thinking about that stuff. But it is very, very interesting to kind of get this from her storyline. And I think something also to note, and this is going to be more realms of the status quo because I just think this is like an interesting note on grief in High School Musical that we don't talk about enough. But how can we relate to status quo to Gabriella's storyline in this particular moment? I think when she talks about maybe staying there for Troy, how can we relate the storyline of the status quo to Gabriella's storyline in High School Musical 3? Thank you so much for asking. Now, this is like obviously something that is not really relevant in the High School Musical world, but I think something interesting that she does. She tries to, instead of giving herself a real shot, right? Just saying, okay, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to go to Stanford, right? She, instead of committing to that, was like, no, maybe I'll just stay and I could be around you for a little bit longer, right? This idea that under patriarchy, right, that women tend to move along with the guys more than the guys move along with the girls, okay? And we kind of flip the script on that in High School Musical. Now, so often, right, we get this storyline of like, maybe I'll go to the same college as the guy, and then they break up, and then like it wasn't worth it in the end. Obviously not, because you should be able to do your own thing, right? Like you're your own person as well. And obviously, Troy and Gabriella are actually a good couple. Like, I have no qualms against them. I'm always hand hurting for Troy and Gabriella. But I like to relate this to the real world because I do think some high school musical, hello, I do think some high school relationships are not as good as Troy and Gabriella. Like, honestly, now granted, it's a movie, right? So it's obviously like more dramatized and like looks cute. But like, honestly, they're cool with each other. Like, that was the whole point. Like, how they started their relationship was truly so authentic, and I think it's really beautiful actually. But it's like, girl, I know you love Troy and you guys are cute and all, but don't sacrifice your future for a man ever. Like, I really do not believe you should do that. And I do like Troy that he was so supportive and he's like, no, obviously go, okay? Like, the rest we'll figure out. Now, in case anyone forgets, we're fast forwarding a little bit. Troy ends up choosing a school that's closer to Gabriella because their whole thing, they said how many miles they were going to be away from each other and it was going to be tough. Because obviously Stanford in California, he was going to go to U of A originally, right? And that's much farther away there in Arizona. So that's actually kind of cute that he picked a closer school to Gabriella so he could be closer to her. It's kind of cute. It's kind of cute. I'm glad we flipped the script on that just a little bit, right? But yeah, no, you cannot postpone what you want to be closer to your boyfriend. I just don't think you should do that in any case. Even in a case where like we're talking Troy and Gabriella, I genuinely think like they're gonna get married and stay together forever. Like honestly, and maybe that's just me wanting that to happen because we don't know the future of the High School Musical characters. But honestly, they're cute. They're cute. I'm cool with that happening. But I will never, even in the best relationships, say that you should give up on going to your dream school that you have always dreamed to go in for a boy. No, no, not even for a nice guy like Troy Bolton. No. For no one. For no one. You do you, girl. You do you. But that is something I just wanted to point out um, that reminded me of the status quo of patriarchy and how often randomly. But I just think like under patriarchy, obviously like women are more likely to move than men, and that's actually proven statistically to be true, which almost made me more mad. But it when I learned that this year, I was like, thank you, Gabriella, for not moving for a boy. Okay, we need to be cheering on Gabriella for that, honestly. So next, we are going to be talking about Chad. Now, actually, can I say the last thing about Chad? In regards to what I just said about Gabriella. Troy was so sad that Gabriella was gonna go away, obviously, and Chad was like, "Listen, like she's just a girl. Like it's okay." But it's just like, Chad, you were cool with Gabriella, and now you're telling Troy like, "Ugh, don't be sad. Like it's fine. Like you'll meet someone else." Like I just thought that was funny. I have to note it. I have to note it. So now let's get to Chad's storyline. Something interesting in my rewatch that I really thought about in High School Musical 3 was that what is the grief in the status quo, right? In accepting things are changing, plans are changing, right? When we deconstruct the status quo, everything we thought we knew has to kind of be rewired. And what is the grief in that? And what is the grief in that in how we see Chad approach Troy in High School Musical 3, particularly? So when Troy is really honest with Chad that he's considering theater, right? What is something we're accepting is that Chad and Troy have been the bestie duo, okay? And they were always had this dream. They were going to go on to U of A together. They were going to play on the basketball team, the Red Hawks together, right? They were going to play together, and they've been friends since they were kids. This is established in the song "The Boys Are Back." And also in High School Musical 2, just to run it back a little bit, one of the reasons Chad was so hurt by what Troy was doing in he was taking privileges from Sharpay, but not even. There was one scene in particular where Troy is having lunch with the Red Hawks, and I always say in High School Musical 2, the friends were not annoyed because Troy was getting all these privileges and they wanted to be included in that. It was just a matter of, hey, we have always been watching the Red Hawk games. We've always talked about going to play at U of A together. And we get a scene where Troy's like, "Oh, hey, Chad, let me invite you over here." And then he thinks that he's going to be like, "Hey, this is my boy Chad. We've been playing since we were kids. We have always wanted to be and wanted to go to U of A, right?" Like, he is asking for an introduction at best to be like, "Hey, this is my friend. We've been following you guys for a long time, right?" And instead, Troy's like, "Hey, actually, they gave me the wrong kind of burger," right? And he's like, "Huh?" Like, right? Like, that is what part of the reason Chad was so hurt in High School Musical 2. So we get to High School Musical 3, and Troy is like, "No, I actually am. I just don't know. Basketball or theater, right?" And in the end, Troy chooses both, right? But this like kind of idea that, oh, like I thought we were gonna go to college together and we were gonna play on the same basketball team, right? And you kind of have to accept like that's not the future that we have anymore. Like that, don't get me wrong, that'd be very cool, but like that's not the future that they're gonna have anymore, right? And I think Chad is dealing with part of the reason, right? The grief of that. And we see at the end of the movie where Troy says that where he's going to go for school, and he's like, "We're still going to play you, right? Okay, cool." They hug it out. Everything's cool, right? And it's just that, like, okay, this idea, this grief of not even just the status quo that it's going to quote unquote take you away from what we were going to do together, but also kind of like Gabriella, right? Things are changing, right? I don't want to say goodbye. We've been together for this long. Like, oh, we are actually going to have to move on, right? In a capacity as you do as you grow up and things change, right? We're not going to be together anymore, like in school. So things are going to be changing, and I think that's so interesting to know about Chad's storyline. And I want to run it back to the number "The Boys Are Back." Iconic number. That's one of my favorite songs from High School Musical 3, to be honest. I just think it's so fun. And what I like about The Boys Are Back is we are really looking at the childlike wonder of it all. So Chad and Troy are having a conversation, which apparently when they were younger, they used to hang out in the junkyard together. Why? Beyond me. Where are their parents? But I'm sorry, like, that was the one thing I was hung up on. I was like, "Remember when we were kids and we used to hang out here?" I go, "You were allowed to hang out in a junkyard?" "Okay, okay." But when they're there, Troy says, "Remember when we were kids and we used to run around here and we could be anything, right?" The song itself is like, "We were superheroes, we were this, we were that, we were saving the girl." Like, right? Like, it's that idea, right? That childlike wonder that you have when you're younger that you could be anything, right? And Chad says to Troy, "When you were on stage, you were like five people," right? And that's so interesting because what I noticed in High School Musical is we never see anyone act, right? We see everyone perform a musical number, but we never see a proper acting scene, okay? Even for Sharpay, which is interesting. Just something to note. But I say this, and it's not even just like it has to be exclusive to children by any means, but what does the status quo do? As you get older, you have to let go of things and be more mature and act a certain way. And this playfulness that you lose if you conform to the status quo as you get older, right? And an interesting thing to note about that is that, like, when you are able to be playful, right, and try new things, whether you're going to stick with it, whether you actually fully enjoy it, whether you want to be productive with it, right? Because our capitalism tie-in, we don't have a lot of capitalism tie-in in High School Musical, but this idea that Sharpay kind of puts on everybody, like, if you're not doing it to, you got to be in it to win it, push to the limit. Like, she wants people to be committed to the theater and the theater only, which is something she does in the first movie. Like, we're gonna see where your loyalties really lie, right? And you can just do things to enjoy things, whether you want to actually pursue it at school or not. It's high school. Like, the what other time do you have to pursue this kind of stuff? Something interesting that happens is in High School Musical 3, Gabriella, who has always been noted to, once she came here and gave the comfort to Troy to break the status quo, like, she kind of brought this playfulness back to East High that they didn't have there before. And she kind of convinces everybody, "No, guys, this is the last time we're going to be together. Let's do this musical together," right? And did everybody want to be a theater person? No, but they did it because you could get into the playfulness of the theater, right? To restore that childlike wonder, to break free of the status quo, right? You can try things, you can do anything. Like I said, it doesn't have to be productive. You can just do it for fun, right? And how does the status quo hold people back from that? And that was such an interesting tie-in that I really, really loved and took away from this movie, because the status quo works in so many insidious ways. And I was just like, wow, that was a great reference to really say, like, there is this playfulness, right? This childlike wonder that you have to contain for your entire life to go on, right? It's just kind of this idea that, like, when you get older, you don't do certain stuff, you don't like certain stuff, or that's a kid thing. Where it's like, well, no, actually, you can enjoy life. Like, what are you supposed to like? You know what I mean? It's like, have a little fun, have a little whimsy in ya, at the very least. So next up, we get Ryan. And although Ryan doesn't have as big of a storyline in High School Musical 3, what I do want to say is, we started really his storyline in High School Musical 2. And I say that because this is the first time in High School Musical 2 that Ryan was kicked out of their supposed to be a duo number, right? Because Sharpay wanted to perform with Troy at the Lava Springs talent show. And we knew from the first movie, Taylor had an iconic line where she said, if Sharpay could play Romeo and Juliet, she would kick Ryan out. Which, now that I think about that, remember, Sharpay and Ryan are siblings. Why were they playing Romeo and Juliet? Okay, I need a moment for that. Like, I didn't even think about that when I said that line. Okay. Okay, well, we can't touch on that today, can we? That's to unpack later. So now let's discuss Ryan. What's interesting about Ryan to me is, although this isn't going to be a big spot here, is that he, in the third movie, is really embracing his independence away from Sharpay, right? He knows directing is his thing. Now, interestingly enough, um, we do also see in this movie how Sharpay is just trying to look out for herself, right? And we see that in I Want It All. Like, imagine having everything we ever dreamed. Don't you want it? Can't you see it? Imagine first audition after college, we get the lead. Apart from me? Well, of course. Ryan rolls his eyes. You and me, all the fame, Sharpay and what's his name, right? Like Ryan knows that Sharpay isn't really looking out for him. Actually, when you look at when they have Sharpay and Ryan written in the I Want It All number, Sharpay's name is bigger. So, like, see, like what I love about Ryan, and especially what he learned in High School Musical too, was that he was breaking away from his sister because his sister never actually, had his best interest in mind. And in High School Musical 3, Ryan is directing the school musical. And when they had their names thrown in for the Juilliard Scholarship, Ryan wins the scholarship. And I think it's great that it went to him because Sharpay, I'm sorry, she has to be humbled a little. I do think it was good that it didn't go to Troy, and we'll get to that later. Now, my question is Sharpay and Ryan, okay? Their parents own a country club. Their dad in the second movie came in on a helicopter. Why can't they afford to send their kids to a good school? Okay? I have a lot of questions about that. Because actually, if anyone should have gotten a Juilliard scholarship, shouldn't that have been Kelsey? Like, and I do think, like, I'm fine with it going to Ryan, but I'm just asking the question that everybody's wondering. What about Kelsey? You know what I mean? Like, honestly, she probably needed the money more than Ryan. Once again, the Evans parents, they got all this, but can't pay for their kids to go to school, to get them into school. Come on. But what I really love about Ryan's storyline is because when we're looking at the storyline next to Sharpay, we're really looking at, well, at the end of the day, we know especially in High School Musical 2, we saw Sharpay always view Ryan as like the duo that was above everybody else, right? And as she takes away the privileges that maybe came with, you know, standing with Sharpay, she basically is saying like, sorry, like it's about me though, and you can figure your stuff out, right? Like she wasn't helping him in any way, shape, or form before. Even when he was a sidekick, like at least he was getting some ish privileges, right? But now he's getting nothing. And Ryan learned that we're all in this together with the Wildcats and started to really embrace his independence and be confident more in his skills as a director, right? And he knows that he can do this shit. And that is really what I think at the end of the day got him the Juilliard scholarship, as being able to gain his independence away from the status quo of, associating with, I'll say, the big wigs, if you will, because at the end of the day, the people on top aren't going to protect you, right? They're only going to think selfishly, like Sharpay. And really, the big storyline with Ryan we see in High School Musical too. But I like to see, like, finally, let's give some fucking crits to Ryan. You know what I mean? Like, Sharpay has talent, yes, but look at how much talent Ryan has, right? He's performing and directing. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Credits to Ryan. Next up, we have Troy. Okay, what is the thing of the status quo? It is the forever work, right? We saw Troy bounce back and forth, breaking the status quo, going back into it. And this part of the movie is very interesting to me because, as I've stated earlier, at some point, Gabriella leaves. We know from the first movie, Gabriella is established as someone who really helped give courage to Troy to break free of the status quo. And even in this movie, encouraged everyone to be playful, right? And participate in the musical, right? To kind of break free of that little status quo there, right? So we know Gabriella gives a lot of courage, right? But we know that's not the only thing it takes to break the status quo, right? It is great to have supportive people along the way, but that isn't everything. You have to break the status quo in your mind, right? Even like in Ben on It, which was a song about accountability, right? Like I have to count on myself instead to do the right thing, right? And that is similar here in that, like, oh, it's not just I feel more confident when I have Gabriella by my side. I have to feel confident in myself and really think about, well, what do I really want to do? And what am I going to do? And then I have to stand 10 toes down and then say I'm going to do that. And that's more difficult, right? When you know you just have to count on yourself to do the things that are right for you. Even if other people are telling you do this, do that. And we get one of the most brilliant High School Musical songs, Scream. This is a phenomenal song. Everybody go back to it. Voices in my head tell me they know best. Got me on the edge. They're pushing. I know they've got a plan, but the ball's in my hands. This time, it's man to man. I'm driving, fighting inside a world that's upside down and spinning faster. What do I do now without you? Sorry, my table shaked as I said that. So, what do I do now without you? Gabriella's gone, right? Everybody's telling me do this, do that. We simultaneously are trying to break the status quo whilst everyone's trying to uphold the status quo still, right? Because even though they have accepted his musical side in a sense, right? It's still like, but you're going to do basketball, right? I think everybody keeps defaulting to this, right? And even Troy is defaulting to this. So at the end of Scream, Miss Starbuss actually catches Troy, and she admits that she is the one who threw in the application for Troy to be a potential Juilliard scholarship winner. Obviously, he didn't win it. And one of the things that she says in this is that better to consider opportunities now than in 10 years when life may limit your choices. I thought this was particularly interesting from the fact that I have been saying this. You know, when you're younger, we think high school, right? You have more opportunities to be playful, to try new things, right? There's all different sorts of clubs and opportunities with school that when you're older, right, and you just have more responsibilities, you don't have the time to do, you don't have the money to do it, or even just the stigma of feeling like maybe Troy was feeling in the first movie. Once you leave high school, you have more responsibilities. It costs more money to join things. And kind of like in the first movie, where Sharpay's like, listen, I've been here longer than you have. Maybe we can find a supporting role for you, right? It's that kind of like stigma of like being new to something. And it almost feels embarrassing for some reason to try something new, especially as you get older, right? And at the end of the day, at any point in your life, you can decide to change your life. You can decide to try something new, like Troy did, right? And there is a fact that if you get older, like things become harder to find. Also, it's because, you know, a lot of people are not starting at beginners and the privilege of knowing what you want to do at a young age, right? Like Sharpay, like Ryan, like Kelsey, and being able to explore that and have the years banked like they did, right? It's not a crime to be new at something, right? It's not a crime to be bad at something. And really what we see in Sharpay's storyline, and we'll get into it, is that she just wants to be the best of the best and no one else can take her spot. So when rethinking about High School Musical 3, I actually realized something so important. Okay, so earlier we talked about the Juilliard scholarship. We talked about how Miss Darvis threw his name in there. We talked about how Ryan did get the Juilliard scholarship. Okay, now why didn't Troy win the Juilliard scholarship? All right. And I get a lot of people who are like, obviously he wasn't supposed to get it. Yeah, makes sense. Sharpay, Ryan, Kelsey, as I argue, really, I was cool with it going to Ryan or Kelsey. Sharpay, like I said, needs to be humbled a little bit. Personally, that's just how I feel. She's doing too much in a wrong way in the High School Musical movies, okay? It's not even that Troy, it's okay, God forbid that they throw him into the running for Juilliard. Now, what's funny to me is that now Troy, he gets up there, does his thing, it's fun and all. The Juilliard reps were up there like, now that's Troy Bolton. He's fun. He's a fun performer. I'm not saying that he isn't. Is he the next Jeremy Jordan? Well, he has a lot of work to get there. So I think it is important that Troy doesn't get the Juilliard scholarship. And I'm not saying this to bog Troy down by any means. And I'm not saying this in a Sharpay way by any means. What I'm saying is, in relation to High School Musical 2, when Sharpay was trying to push Troy into this U of A thing, right? And was giving him all these privileges, right? And it's kind of easier when someone's like, hey, like, here's an easy way in. You should just do this. Wasn't this what you were going to do anyway, right? Troy is not really giving himself a choice, right? Because he's just taking the easy route. And when Miss Jarvis threw his name in, and why we get the Scream number, right, is that, oh, now I should consider theater, right? Because Troy wasn't allowing himself to even consider theater as a choice. He was going to go with basketball, but he was confused. Do I give this a chance? Do I not? Is this something I'm serious about? I don't know, but I do like doing it and I would like to do more of it, right? Like the whole point of the song Scream is that he is confused and doesn't know what to do. But that moment where Miss Starbus reminds him, like, this is still an option for you. It's not the point of that it was as big of a school as Juilliard. It's the point of reminding someone that that's an option as well, because he wasn't necessarily giving himself that shot, right? And you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And something I always say is that it had to be Troy's choice. That's the whole point of breaking free of the status quo. And that Troy had to learn without Gabriella what it was like to break free of the status quo. And really, also not in just being honest with everyone about what he genuinely wanted to do, right? Because that's certainly part of it, but also being honest with himself, right? At the end of the day, you have to count on yourself. And that is the point, that it was supposed to be Troy's choice. Troy was supposed to make the choice whether he was going to do basketball and theater. And at the end of the movie, he decides to do both, okay? So it wasn't even about the prestigiousness of Juilliard. And going on about that. It was about that it was supposed to be Troy's choice to really round out our experience in deconstructing the status quo. That was the point of it. I also like to relate this to Eddie's Million Dollar Cook Off, High School Musical's younger sister. Okay, is that in Eddie's Million Dollar Cook Off, he gets to compete in the cook off. Does he win the cook off? No. But that wasn't the point of it, right? That defeats the point. If Eddie were to win, and he magically became a chef overnight. That wasn't the point of it. It was this point of allowing yourself to get to the point where you will proudly do the thing despite what everyone else thinks. So, last but not least, I have saved Miss Sharpay Evans for last, of course. Okay, so interestingly enough, Sharpay, as I've stated, no one really has a big plot in this movie, okay? But do we still see the same thing about Sharpay? Of course we do, for a couple reasons. Sharpay is kind of excited that Gabriella is leaving because she is going to play Gabriella's part in the musical, right? And she just wants to be next to Troy. For whatever reason, like I said earlier, beyond me at this point, because y'all don't even like this boy, okay? Why are we so wrapped up in Troy Bolton? And I feel like I didn't note that about my in my High School Musical 2 episode, because it's like almost a like internalized patriarchy of like trying to, I don't know, get the attention of a man and trying to prop him up in High School Musical 2 for what? Like, if you really are the star of the show, like, you don't, what are you trying to prop up Troy Bolton for beyond me, because you don't even like him like that? You know what I mean? Like, there's too much to unpack there I won't get into today. But High School Musical 3, like I said, first off, she wants to take Gabriella's spot, which is so funny. Sure, girl, go for it, go for it. She That also means who's gonna take Sharpay's spot. I'm surprised she didn't just try to do both. If Unless I really don't know if there were scenes in the musical where like Gabriella and Sharpay would also be there. I don't know. Essentially, there is like a mini Sharpay who just started at that school and wants to kind of take over Sharpay's throne, essentially, and she wants to be the Sharpay. So you get to see them kind of hash it out in all those ways, and it's just like a little storyline there. But the most interesting part of Sharpay's storyline here is when we get an insight into her mindset. Okay, so as I've stated, Troy's name thrown in for the Juilliard scholarship. Sharpay's like, excuse me? Excuse me. Obviously, it would go to me. And what do we know Sharpay likes to do? She likes to plant delusional seeds in her head. And we saw this from the first movie, right? Where Troy was just trying to try something new for the heck of trying something new. And it was just something fun and new to do. And you're allowed to do that, right? And Sharpay's like, they must be making a mockery of the theater. Troy's doing this to try to, I don't know, outshine me. Like, it was this weird, like, competitiveness that she projected onto them. And they were literally just doing it for fun, mind you. Like, right? None of this stuff that Sharpay was planting inside her head, the delusional seeds she was letting grow inside her head, were actually correct. Do you know what I mean? So, we see her chatting with Ryan after the announcement that Troy's name is thrown in for the Juilliard Scholarship. I'm talking about the show Ryan. That puppy dog, Troy Bolton, pretended to know nothing about Juilliard. Ryan says Troy looked genuinely surprised, right? Because she's saying, no, He's playing naive. He knew. He must have gotten into the Juilliard scholarship. And I mean this so nicely. You think Troy Bolton even knew what the fuck Juilliard was? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like he was barely giving himself a chance to really explore theater. I don't really think he knew about Juilliard like that. I really don't believe that. Like I said, she's planting the delusional seeds like he knew what he was doing. Now, here's the interesting part because sometimes people will be saying it out loud and you just need to be listening. Oh, so the theater fairy magically sent in Troy's application? Remember, Miss Darpus did it. We didn't know it at this time. Performers can't fool me, Ryan. They're deceitful, ambitious, and ruthless. And then Ryan's like, we're performers. And she's like, exactly. Right? Like, she is telling you how she thinks. They're deceitful, ambitious, and ruthless. Was that not Sharpay? The first whole two High School Musical movies? Guys? Guys? Hello? Was that not Sharpay? The first few High School Musical movies? She's saying it out loud, and this is what people fail to remember about Sharpay is that she knows what she's doing, and that's the point. What happens when someone in a position of power like Sharpay, right? She kind of has the say over the entirety of the theater, right? For 17 years, she held the lead with her brother Ryan. And so when Troy comes in and challenges that, right? Because you have to remember, you recall the scene back in the first High School Musical movie signing up for the leads, right? She was the only one on that audition sheet, right? So she wasn't everybody, she kind of established an environment where like everybody knows this is not even attainable to you. Do not even bother to sign up because I'm going to win every time. Right? So if you don't question that the position of power that Sharpay is in the theater, you're not it makes sense you're not going to get Sharpay's storyline. But trust when it comes to Sharpay, there will be a full layout of Sharpay's actions and how we can relate that to the real world and her type of thinking. Because something so interesting, as you should know by now, from High School Musical, is that we are watching a story of everybody deconstructing the status quo in their storylines. Now, is Sharpay really deconstructing the status quo in her storylines? I don't know if I necessarily believe that because at the end of the movies, like, yes, she does, like, I don't know, just kind of rally together with everybody else, but like there was never any accountability, right? Like in High School Musical 2, Troy stopped, he took accountability and moved forward. Where Sharpay was never like, oh shoot, right? And even in Sharpay's Fabulous Adventures, which I do have an episode on as well, like, and that's not Sharpay's fault, that is just the writer's fault. And no tea, no shade to the writers. It was just like Sharpay could have had a potential interesting storyline. And for those who don't care to listen to that episode, it is just like Sharpay would have learned her lesson if we did a Cowbells like storyline. And if you have not watched Cowbells or have not seen it in a long time, as an adult, watch it. We are talking about solidarity. We are talking about getting the workers together, rich girls going to work at the dairy farm and actually learning a thing or fucking two about people who are not privileged and what happens when potentially everybody could lose their jobs. But I can't get into cowbells now, but I'm just saying, if Sharpay had a storyline like that, then she would be really redeemable to me in that Sharpay is still a very interesting character. Obviously, no one is ever arguing that. But to me, I would have perceived her to learn a lesson at the very least if we did something like that. But overall, today we tackled in High School Musical 3 the grief of change, right? And transition to something new. And that is what happens as you move on from high school. And we saw that in Gabriella's storyline. We just spoke about Sharpay projecting her way of thinking onto others and how that can uphold very interesting thinking patterns that tend to uphold the status quo, as we saw. If performers are ruthless and we assume this of all, then we will just fight it out. If everything's a competition to Sharpay, then of course she's going to be nasty to everyone. But doesn't need to be that serious where she is doing all this shit for every single movie. No, it does not. So we can learn a thing or two about that, but Sharpay did not learn. That's okay. That's okay. We move on. Ryan really finally embracing his independence and establishing himself away from his sister, who at the end of the day just wanted to be the star of the show anyway. And Ryan was able to really hone in on his craft, and he saw that he was respected by everyone. Chad, the grief of the status quo, and kind of similar to Gabriella, but in a different way, of accepting that things change. And what is the grief in the status quo if we need to rewrite how we thought things were going to happen and what things were going to be like? We spoke about childlike wonder. What is the importance of playfulness as you get older, and how, when you are void of that, it upholds the status quo? And last but not least, Troy, our boy, really, really fighting and battling this or that. Do I conform, or do I really give myself a shot doing what I am interested in? The thing of the status quo, the lesson we learn is that it is the forever work to break free of it, right? Because it doesn't happen overnight. We're deconstructing these things in a society that is still simultaneously upholding them. And we know, have you ever changed the way you thought about something? Has it happened overnight, right? It takes time to really give yourself a shot. No basketball pun intended in Troy's case. But the status quo, right? We have to be open to change, right? And acknowledge the grief and the pressure, the societal pressure we feel to mold to the status quo. How do we police ourselves and others to the status quo? And it's really a constant back and forth. It's not easy. For example, like when everybody talks about Sharpay, it's really funny to me because when I see Troy or Gabriella hit pieces, it's just like, come on, guys, please get real. But one thing people say is, well, Sharpay, at least she know what she wanted to do. And it's like, well, honey, the movie wouldn't exist if the point wasn't breaking free of the status quo. Like, it's just like, okay, okay. And is it a privilege to know what you want to do? And how does Sharpay's storyline kind of get into white entitlement? That would be something to think about that I'll cover in my Sharpay episode. But it is just like, well, yes, like if Troy didn't need to learn to break the status quo, we wouldn't have had any of the High School Musical movies. So it gets to a point where it's like, right. So the lesson of the movie is for us to understand the status quo. What is the environment that led both everybody policing Troy and also Troy even policing himself into the status quo? How did we get here? Right? From Troy's storyline. How did we get here from Sharpay's storyline? And understanding how she fits into everything in the status quo. Because High School Musical, we are evaluating the very different ways that everybody upholds the status quo, and both the outside societal struggles but also the internal struggles. And if we fail to really look at that and analyze that, how do we even make change, right? And that is the one thing I have loved about doing this rewatch of High School Musical, is that it is so telling, and it is my favorite thing about watching movies from my childhood. And you're like, wait a second, like they were truly saying so much. And whether you want to take it super seriously or not is neither here nor there, because as I have just analyzed, there is always more to look at and really understand the different ways of how we see this. And there are so many different storylines through breaking free of the status quo that could still be told. And that is why we see this a lot in a lot of TV shows and a lot of movies, is because this is something that everyone can relate to. Whether they want to acknowledge that or not is neither here nor there, but breaking free of the status quo or feeling the pressures of it is something every single person can relate to.